A ramp in Texas. Summer heat bending the air above the asphalt. A clean 1972 Cherokee 140 sitting in fresh white paint, polished spinner, new interior leather still creasing at the seams. Listing price $48,000. Hobbs reading 1,400 hours since major overhaul. Seller's pitch, no damage history, complete logs, flies great. The buyer wrote the check. 60 days later, a mechanic pulled the oil filter, sliced it open, and found metal. Not dust, chunks. He bore-scoped the accessory case. Cam lobes pitted with rust. Lifters chewed down to bare steel. The oil gallery runs 3 inches below where the cam sits when the engine stops turning. Teardown estimate, $33,000. That number assumes the crankshaft and case halves pass inspection. If the crank is pitted, add another $8,500 for an aftermarket replacement. If the case is cracked, the engine is scrap. That airplane cost $48,000. Saving the engine inside it will cost $33,000 on a good day. And here is the detail that turns a bad annual into a permanent financial trap. The engine bolted to that Cherokee can never be legally upgraded past 150 horsepower. 2 letters on the data plate sealed this deal before the deposit cleared. O-320-E2D. Nobody told the buyer never checked. Have you purchased a Cherokee without reading the data plate first? Tell me in the comments. This is what Sky Ranch covers. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Piper built 32,778 Cherokees. That number makes it the second most produced single-engine airplane in history, behind only the Cessna 172. Production started in 1961 at Vero Beach, Florida, and has not stopped. Fred Weick and John Thorpe designed the airframe as the working pilot's airplane. Low wing, all-metal, tricycle gear, forgiving stall characteristics with the root braking first, so the ailerons keep working. A door that opens by stepping onto the wing. For decades, a mechanic could own one. That airframe is not the problem. Cherokee rivets and wing geometry have proven themselves across 65 years and 6 continents. Embraer. License built them in Brazil. Chincool assembled them in Argentina. AICSA produced them in Colombia. By the end of 2004, Piper's production records showed 10,089 PA-28 140s, 7,455 PA-28 150, 160 180s, 4,256 PA-28 181 Archers, 5,504 PA-28 151 161 Warriors, and 2,856 PA-28 235 236 Dakotas. The basic structure works. The fleet is enormous, and a buyer shopping used Cherokees today will find more of them for sale in any given week than any other piston single except the 172. Abundance is the trap. Piper bolted 7 different engine families into 24 model designations over those 65 years. Not every Cherokee on the ramp is the same deal. The original Cherokee 150 and Cherokee 160 entered production in 1961. A year later, Piper added the Cherokee 180 with a Lycoming O-360 rated at 180 horsepower. That extra 30 horses made the airplane a genuine 4-seater for the first time. In 1963, the Cherokee 235 arrived with a 6-cylinder O-540. In 1964, Piper filled the bottom of the lineup with the Cherokee 140, a 2-seat trainer built around a D-rated O-320. By the mid-1970s, the tapered wing replaced the original constant chord Hershey bar planform, and the marketing names started cycling: Challenger, Charger, Pathfinder, Warrior, Archer, and Dakota. Names changed. Engines changed. The question a buyer must answer has never changed. What suffix is stamped on the data plate? Some of those engines rank among the most reliable piston power plants ever certified. One earned the worst reputation in Lycoming's entire production history, and one carries a structural limitation so fundamental that no supplemental type certificate, no mechanic, and no amount of money can fix it. A Cherokee is not one airplane. It is a family where the smartest purchase and the most expensive mistake sit side by side on the same tie-down, wearing the same paint, listed at the same price. One engine separates them. Lycoming O-360-A4M, 180 horsepower, 4 cylinders, carbureted, 2,000-hour time between overhauls. This engine powers the PA-28 Cherokee and the PA-28 Archer. It runs on 80 and 87 octane. Every A and P mechanic in the country has cracked one open. Parts fill the catalog from 5 different suppliers. Field overhaul runs $25,000 to $35,000 at a reputable shop, and the engine routinely reaches its time between overhauls with nothing more than oil changes and a pilot who flies it every week. It does not make headlines. It makes 122 knots, burns 9 gallons an hour, and carries 4 adults with luggage at a useful load north of 900 pounds. Greg Merrill at Aircraft Specialty Services in Tulsa grinds and reconditions cam lobes and tappets for engine shops across the country. He told Aviation Consumer that cam failures in the O-360 family start in the lifters, not the lobes. The fix is straightforward: cam guard additive and regular flight. A stored O-360 corrodes the same way every Lycoming does. A flown O-360 reaches its time between overhauls and asks for nothing. Hardened valve seats make this engine ready for the unleaded avgas transition without modification. GAMI's G100UL received Federal Aviation Administration Supplemental Type Certificate approval for the O-320, O-360, and IO-360 families in July 2021. By September 2022, that approval expanded to cover every spark ignition piston engine in the Federal Aviation Administration's Type Certificate database. George Brawley, GAMI's co-founder, reported over 700 hours of endurance testing with 0 evidence of exhaust valve seat recession. Used market price for a PA-28 180 ranges from $50,000 to $110,000 depending on vintage, avionics, and engine time. Early models from the 1960s sit at the low end. Late production Wonder 80s with modern panels push toward $140,000. Overhaul runs $25,000 to $35,000 when the time comes. Both the purchase price and the overhaul cost live in the same financial universe. You can plan for one while paying off the other. Now look at the Cherokee 140. Same ramp, same paint, similar panel. Price tag $35,000 to $55,000. A buyer standing between the two airplanes sees a $15,000 savings for slightly less speed. On paper, that trade looks rational. Under the cowl, it is a different airplane. Cherokee 140 carries a Lycoming O-320-E2D, 150 horsepower, cruise speed 108 knots, fuel burn 7 gallons an hour, climb rate 660 feet per minute at sea level, all respectable numbers for a trainer. Here is where the data plate matters more than the listing. Inside the E2D, Lycoming used the same front main bearing as the O-235 series engine. That is the power plant in the Cessna 152, a 2-seat trainer engine. That bearing is physically too small to support a 180 horsepower conversion. Paul McBride, one of the most published Lycoming engine columnists in general aviation, confirmed it in his General Aviation News column. The front main bearing blocks. The upgrade path. No supplemental type certificate exists. No field modification is legal. A buyer can squeeze out a 10 horsepower bump to 160 through a Ram STC. Cost is $295 for the paperwork, plus new cylinders, pistons, a carburetor swap, and a propeller repitch. Ram's own documentation is honest about this conversion. Ram's own website is blunt about the result. 10 extra horsepower adds a few knots of cruise and a slightly better climb gradient on hot days. It does not turn a trainer into a traveling machine. Want 180 horsepower? Remove the entire engine, pull the motor mount, swap the propeller, replace everything forward of the firewall with an O-360 and the plumbing to match. Penn Yan Aero offers that conversion through their Superhawk STC, a factory TSIO-360. A4M through Lycoming requires a lead time the factory currently quotes at approximately 3 years. Pricing on the factory engine alone has climbed to the neighborhood of $70,000. Even a Penn Yan Exchange O-320, not the 360 upgrade, costs $42,000 plus a $12,000 core deposit. Run the numbers on that $35,000 Cherokee 140. Add the engine the airframe needs to become a real 4-seat airplane. You are looking at $90,000 to $100,000 all in for an airplane that a PA-28 delivers from the factory. Every dollar spent chasing the upgrade could have bought the right airplane in the first place. The E2D is not a bad engine, it is a dead end, but the Cherokee family hides a worse engine story, and it starts with a suffix that still makes mechanics wince. O-320-E2D. Lycoming introduced this variant in the mid-1970s. Piper installed it in Cherokees. Cessna bolted it into 172N models. From the outside, it looked like every other O-320 in the catalog. Inside the case, Lycoming made a cost reduction decision. Smaller diameter tappets, narrower cam lobes, less metal where metal matters most. Within the first few hundred hours, early production E2D engines started destroying themselves. Cam lobes pitted, lifter faces spalled, flaking metal in sheets through the oil system like sand through a gearbox. Lycoming released a mandatory additive requirement and started shipping a supplemental lubricant with every new E2D. Pilots called it snake oil. Mechanics called it a band-aid on a design flaw. Alan Weiss at Certified Engines in Opa-locka, Florida, has been in the engine business since 1978. He told Aviation Consumer that KM rejection rates at overhaul climbed from roughly 1 in 20 to approximately 1 in 7 across the industry. Something changed in the fuel or the oil in recent years, and nobody can say exactly what. Bill Middlebrook at Penn Yan Aero reported a brand new camshaft wiping a lobe in the test cell before the engine ever left the shop. A 0-hour cam, factory fresh, destroyed on the dyno. The mechanism is the same one that kills every stored Lycoming. The cam sits higher than the oil line inside the crankcase. When the engine stops turning, the cam is the first surface to go dry. Moisture from condensation collects on the bare metal. Corrosion starts. Pitting follows. And when the engine fires up again, those pitted surfaces grind against each other under load. The E2D's narrower cam lobes and smaller tappet faces concentrated that load onto less surface area. More pressure per square inch on corroded metal. Faster failure. Lycoming did not issue a recall. They issued a serial number suffix. Original configuration engines carried numbers like L340676. Engines rebuilt with the corrective T modification, larger tappets and wider cam lobes received an appended letter, L340676A, one character on a data plate. No fleet grounding, no public announcement, just a quiet paper trail that a buyer would never find unless a mechanic pointed at the engine plate and explained what the suffix means. One pilot on a maintenance forum put it this way: if you are going to print the Airworthiness Directive compliance list for an E2D, make sure the paper bin is full. $42,000 for an exchange engine, $33,000 for a teardown, on an airplane that listed for $48,000. Does that math confirm what you already suspected about buying a Cherokee without reading the logs? Engines are half the equation. Cherokee airframes carry their own buried cost, and this one is measured in lives. In 2018, a Piper Arrow lost its wing during a training flight. Both the Federal Aviation Administration examiner and the student pilot died. That airplane was 11 years old with 7,600 hours on the airframe. Every hour came from flight training, touch-and-go landings, student approaches. The kind of repetitive G loading a weekend flyer never accumulates in a lifetime. A fatigue fracture had grown invisibly in the lower spar cap at the bolted joint to the carry-through structure inside the cabin. It grew until the wings separated in flight. 2 airworthiness directives followed. Airworthiness Directive AD 2020's 2405 requires wing spar corrosion inspections on PA-28 140, 150, 160, 180, and 235 models, plus PA-32-260 and 300 variants. It covers 11,476 airplanes on the US registry. Inspection cost is roughly $170 in labor. If corrosion is found and the spar needs replacement, the bill exceeds $12,000 per wing. Airworthiness Directive AD 2020-26-16 targets the tapered wing models specifically: Warriors, Archers, Arrows, and Dakotas. EDI current inspections of the lower spar bolt holes for fatigue cracking. Another 5,400 airplanes. Estimated cost $1,000 per inspection. Browse trade. A-plane listings for used Cherokees today. You will see sellers advertising spar AD complied with as a selling point. That phrase now carries the same weight as no damage history or complete logs. It is a filter, a Cherokee listed without spar. AD compliance is either priced to reflect the risk or hiding a bill the next owner will pay. A buyer in 2026 must answer two questions before any deposit. Has the spar AD been complied with, and what did the inspector find? Training airplanes and personal airplanes carry the same type certificate, same model, same year, same engine. The logs are the only difference. A Cherokee that spent 20 years at a flight school carries invisible fatigue that a Cherokee from a private hangar does not. Skip the logbooks and you are betting structural integrity on someone else's landing technique. One more engine deserves a warning. PA-28 Turbo Dakota, Continental TSIO-360-FB, 200 horsepower through a turbocharger. Aviation Consumer reported its trouble and accident rates at 4 times higher than the rest of the Cherokee family based on fleet proportion. Piper built 91 of them between 1979 and 1980 before stopping production. Time between overhauls, 1,800 hours, 200 fewer than every Lycoming in the family. Overhaul cost, north of $32,000 for a turbocharged Continental 6-cylinder. Parts pipeline for a discontinued engine in fewer than 100 airframes gets thinner every year. 91 airplanes, 4 times the trouble rate. That is not a Cherokee, that is a warning label wearing Cherokee paint. Somewhere in 32,778 airframes and 65 years of production sits the most honest 4-seat airplane in general aviation. Sitting next to it, same row, same price, is a financial trap with a frozen upgrade path, a buried cam crisis, or a wing spar nobody checked. One suffix separates them. O-360. A4M in a 1975 Archer or a well-maintained PA-28 180 is one of the most reliable engines Lycoming ever certified. 2,000-hour TBO that mechanics watch engines reach routinely. 122 knots of cruise, and a fuel burn your wallet can survive. Overhaul costs that stay in the same zip code as the purchase price. O-320-E2D locks you at 150 horsepower forever. H2AD carries a reputation that suppresses resale whether a shop completed the T modification or not. TSIO-360-FB is a discontinued Continental in an airframe fewer than 91 people fly. Every early serial Hershey bar wing Cherokee needs its spar inspected before you write a check. General aviation gets more expensive every year. Overhaul costs have doubled in a decade. A factory new Lycoming engine runs $105,000 with a 3-year lead time. Wyke and Thorpe designed the Cherokee as the airplane a working pilot could afford to own and maintain. That promise still holds. But only if the engine under the cowl is the right one. The airplane does not care what you paid. The cam sits higher than the oil line, it goes dry first, and the data plate does not lie. Are you Team O-360 or Team O-320? If you own a Cherokee, what engine suffix is on your data plate? Drop it below. Subscribe to Sky Ranch. This is what we do.